Thank you all for being here. I'm just going to start off now. We're really excited to welcome you to the first IKFF 2023 online workshop. Our conductor, our host for today is Aditi. Aditi is, she's an India-based cinematographer and a filmmaker, and she studied at the Film and Television Institute of India and has gone on to shoot and co-produce two award-winning indie films, Tikli and Laxmi Bomb and Incessant Fear of Rape. They were both released on Netflix India later on. She's also a DP, which is a director of photography and cinematographer, as I mentioned earlier. And her film won the FIPRESCI award in 2021. She's been the recipient of many, many awards and bursaries over the last couple of years, and she's currently directing her first documentary, which was adjudged the best pitch at Doc Edge in New Zealand in 2022. So we have a very esteemed host today who's come, and she's spending her time with us. I will just actually turn it over to you and have you take it forward, Aditi. Welcome and have a wonderful workshop.
Thank you, Akanksha. Without further ado, I think we should start with the workshop. Good morning to all the students joining in today. I'm very excited to talk about screenplay writing with you all. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the chat. Akanksha and the team would be happy to take them up. If they're relevant in the course of the presentation, we can take them while we move from step to step, or we could just have them later once the presentation is finished. So basically, what I'm going to talk about today is our journey from a story to screen. Screenplay writing becomes important because we all have stories, we all have ideas, but basically when we watch a film, the way scripts are written for a film are very, very different from how we would be writing a story, either to be spoken at an event on a stage, or whether it has to be written as an essay or a book. So I'll just take you through the journey of of the basics of screenplay writing, so that you get inspired and you take away something today. When you go and watch films after this, you probably should be able to pinpoint some of the tools that I'm going to give you today. So introduction, why are stories important? So basically, this is where it all starts, that we all want to understand the world around us through stories, because stories make us feel something. And in the entire process of films, once you guys, if any of you guys decide to make films as a hobby, if you guys want to make it professionally, there's always this one thing that you must remember, whether you're writing the story, whether you're preparing a treatment, whether you're deciding how to shoot it, whether you're deciding which music to use, that it must make people feel something. So if your story doesn't make the audience feel something, it's not going to work as a film. So the first lesson to know if it's a good story or not is that it should have something in it. It should either make someone else laugh, it should make someone cry, it should make someone angry, it should evoke some emotions in people. And that's how human beings have historically understood the world around them. This is how they come to empathize with each other through stories. And that's why even in India, if you see around you, there are so many different ways in which storytelling is done, not just the audiovisual mediums, but also you would remember the stories that your grandmoms or moms would tell you when you were kids. So we've all grown up on stories. So make sure that when you're telling, you tell a good one. Now, what is a good story? A good story is basically the one where you actually root for the protagonist. For example, the story of an underdog is always something that works, because we all see ourselves also as underdogs, somebody who doesn't have anything, and then just because of their perseverance, just because of their commitment, just because of their hard work, are able to beat the odds, move up, and achieve what they set out to do. So, so those are basically, that's what makes a good story. When you have a protagonist, when you have a main subject, a hero who you relate to, who you know, looks and feels like someone like you, and when you're rooting for that person, and when that person's victory to you feels like a personal victory. So that's what makes a good story. So no matter which genre you're writing, whether you're writing a drama, whether you're writing a comedy, whether you're writing action, whether you're writing a superhero film, across genres, this is what makes a good story. That whoever is your main protagonist, even if that person is, you know, like an anti-hero, or, you know, like someone who's a thief, for example, in a story, but you must make him more human. You must make him more real, so that when people are watching the film, they relate to that person. Then how is it different from writing for other mediums? You may have already started you know, story writing in your schools, and the way it would be different from when you're writing something for a story writing competition, for example, or if you're writing for your school magazine. How this is going to be different is that it's, first of all, you have to understand that screenplay writing is not done for reading. Screenplay is written to be made for the screen. So the screenplay is not something that people are going to read. People are going to watch the film, which was based on the screenplay that you have written. So which means that the screenplay is only for you and for the people who are working on the film. So it's a technical document. It's something that basically is written in a particular format. A format is, you know, basically the font Courier is used, and a 12 font size is used. This is basically a standardization which has been used over the years, because one page, when you basically use this font and this font size, your one page becomes equal to 1 minute of screen time. That's basically some kind of a standard that we have arrived at. So it means that if you're writing a 90-page screenplay, it will be roughly equal to 90 minutes of screen time. So, of course, I mean, these will differ from film to film. A short film would have a shorter screenplay. A feature-length film that you go and watch in theaters would have much larger screenplays, and it has to include a lot of technical information. Now, this is, if you see on your screen, this is the kind of a format that we use when we're writing the screenplay. So you basically start with information, that where is, you know, you basically the story has to be broken down into scenes. So once you've broken them down into scenes, each scene, one after the other, is basically what forms the film. So take your story, and in case you guys have a story already, it's a good practice to first start thinking of how that story can be broken down into scenes. Typically, a scene would be all the action happening in one location at one time. So Madhuri, if you could just go back to the previous slide. Yeah. So this would include your information, like it's an interior scene. INT basically means interior, EXT means exterior. So is it happening inside a house, a room, or is it happening somewhere outside, on the street, or at the railway station? So that's something that you need to specify. So here, like for example, they've said interior Jane's house, master bedroom. So that's the description. That's where the scene is happening. And you have to mention whether it's day, whether it's night, whether it's evening. This is basically the breakdown of our scene. The second thing it needs to have is the action. What is the action that's happening in the scene? So for example, if you're writing just a story, you may be talking about a lot of other things. You may be talking a lot about how people are feeling and, what they are seeing. But in a screenplay, which is being written for a film, you have to keep in mind that you have to include a lot of visual and audio elements in it. So for example, here they have said that Jane Doe tiptoes across the room, a candle in her hand. She reaches the doorway, pokes her head into the hallway, which means that when you read this, you can actually start visualizing how it's going to be coming on the screen. And then, of course, it's also accompanied by dialogues. So Jane Doe's dialogue is hello. And at the end of it, when the action is finished, when at the end of the hallway, a closet door creaks open. So creaks open also gives you an idea that there is a sound element involved in it. So when somebody who's going to shoot the film looks at this, they're going to know that basically the mood and the feel of the script is that this is the point where Jane Doe is going to feel very scared because she is tiptoeing. She's anticipating that there might be somebody out there in the hallway. And also, if you see, there is a description that says that she nervously asks, is anyone there? Which means that when an actor is looking at it, they know that this is the point where they have to be nervous. So these are the little cues that need to be written in a screenplay, which is not something you would probably, this is not the format that you would be writing in when you're writing for a book, say, for example. So same thing that when you say creaks open, then you can visualize that the door opens slightly and there is a slight creak sound that comes in. So that's the main difference between writing a story and writing a screenplay. That these are things you keep in mind. You include the dialogues and they have to be written in this very format. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So here I'll just give you an example. So here's a story. It's a part of a story where basically, so there's a boy called Ethan, and Ethan has been invited to participate in a concert because he's a budding musician, but he's really nervous and he doesn't know if he would be able to perform on a stage in front of so many people. So that's the background. So in this particular part of the story, what happens is that Ethan is, standing somewhere looking at the pamphlet and he's feeling really nervous. He's in two minds whether he should go and register for the concert or not. So what happens here is Ethan's grandfather, who had always been his biggest supporter, noticed his grandson's inner turmoil. He sat down with Ethan and shared a story from his own youth. And then he starts saying that I was also filled with self-doubt, just like you are now. But I decided to seek guidance from a wise old artist in a nearby town. So he's trying to basically encourage him to go take part in that. This is just a part of that story. Now, this is a story which is, say, for example, written for a book. So before this and after this, there'll be a lot of description about his inner turmoil and what are the thoughts running in his mind. But you must understand that these are not the kind of things that can be directly translated to a film. How do you show somebody's inner turmoil? Either you show, like you have like a voiceover, which basically repeats the words which are echoing in his mind. So there are various tools in which that can be done. Or visually, that when you see somebody and you create a certain kind of mood and feel around it, you understand that the person is going through some kind of a turmoil. So when you adapt it to a screenplay now, for example, we specify that this is scene number 3. It's a day scene. It's interior because it's inside his house. Now, how do you start visualizing it? That that basically in the story, you get introduced to his turmoil through his grandfather. So the scene has to open with the grandfather. So you first see the grandfather who walks past his room and he notices something and stops. So you just look at him noticing something, and he looks at it and stops where he's going. Then you cut to Ethan. So these are, again, these are things that tools that we can use when you're writing it. You also start visualizing it in your head. So this is the second part of film. So first, when you take a story, you break it down into a scene, and then you break it down into shots. So shot one, the grandfather walks past, looks at something, stops. So you cut the shot. Then the second shot is, you basically, now if I'm writing this, I want the people to see what the grandfather is, what he just saw. What he saw was Ethan, who is sitting on his bed with a pamphlet in his hand, looking pensive. So that's the cue for the actor. That's how he has to be sitting. That's the setting in his room. He's sitting on his bed with the pamphlet in his hand, wondering whether I should go to this concert or not. So that's it. Then again, you go back to the grandfather, who walks in and sits next to him and looks at the pamphlet. Now, this again could be a cue for somebody who's shooting the film, that when he's looking at the pamphlet, you may want to also cut to a shot of the pamphlet, a close-up of the pamphlet. These are things we do not specify in the screenplay, because these are things we also leave for the interpretation of the director. Sometimes screenplay writers are not the same as directors. In fact, sometimes even the people who write the dialogues for films may be different people. So screenplay, you could think of it as just like a skeleton of a film, and everyone else who comes on board to make that film then brings in their own interpretation of how they see it, how they would want to bring it on the screen, including the actors, including the sound recordists, the sound designers, the costume designers, the art designers who bring in the props. So there'll be someone who will be, say, for example, taking care of the props in the film. So for them, a lot of information, so everything basically is available in the screenplay. So they know that if they have to create a room, they have to create a room of a teenage boy, there has to be a bed, there has to be a pamphlet that gives out the details of the events which are inviting him to take part in it. So those are the details you must add for everyone who's going to be coming and reading this. And then they will be making their notes. And that's how the film is going to be eventually shot. So he looks at the pamphlet, it's a pamphlet of the event, and then you have his dialogue. So the dialogue remains the same, which was there in the story, but now we've given it a shape of the screenplay. So basically all the information comes in, your action comes in, that who's doing what. A person walks, a person sits, a person runs, a person is about to take a bus. So everything has to be broken down into these three things. Again, dialogues are something which is also a specialized field. Sometimes, you have characters who may belong to a particular city, to a particular community. And so, that's why sometimes we hire specialized dialogue writers who can write engaging and interesting dialogues. If you remember, watching some films, there'll be some memorable dialogues that you will always remember for years to come. They become cult dialogues. You make memes out of those. So, so dialogues are really, really important, because those are the things that really hold the audience, and they must be written with a lot of care. If you decide to write your own dialogues, for example, then you have to consider many aspects of writing. For example, what is the age of the person who's saying it? So if a grandfather is talking to his grandson, he would, be talking in a certain way. He speaks with experience. So that will show in the way he explains this. If you're talking about, a child, if, somebody your own age, a teenager, belonging to, say, for example, a city like Delhi, then you could probably look at how you talk or how your friends talk, and you could include a lot of, words, and, there could be a lot of gestures which could be included when those people are talking. Similarly, if you go and maybe talk about a woman who lives, in some remote part of the country, then you may have to do your research. You may have to find out how they talk, what is the dialect they use. Is there any particular quirk that comes with the character? Like, for example, in many films, you will find that some characters, have what we call a takiya kalam. So they'll, use that same thing again and again. After every sentence, they'll finish everything with that one line. So those are the kind of things you must consider when you're writing. You must think about the character, where that character is from, what kind of a language or words is he or she likely to use. So those are the things you must consider. And when you are writing your scenes, again, like I said, you must think of a visual and an audio medium. The film is a visual and audio medium. Many a times we end up, writing a lot of things and then try to explain them through dialogues, but that's not necessary. So when you are, like taking your story and converting it into a screenplay, remember that if it's something that can be shown, then don't say it. So the golden rule is to show and not tell. So if you want to say that a person is feeling sad, for example, you could probably just be showing him from a far distance where you see him very little on the screen. And you are implying that that person is feeling very lonely, that in a very large space, he just sits alone with his head in his hands like that. And that just says to you visually, and you can use the kind of music which also denotes loneliness. And then in your dialogues, you don't have to write that he goes and says, I am feeling very lonely, because it's not required. So the lesser the dialogues are, the better it is, because it is an audiovisual medium. Your audience is intelligent, and they don't need to be, spoon-fed some of the things. So remember to use these things. Think about when, you go around your daily life. Think about if this had to be written into a scene, what are the sounds and sights that can be used in your scenes that enhance your experience of that story. Whether it is, some kind of a sound of a TV blaring in the background, which is disturbing, or whether it is a nice sound, whether it is footsteps. So those are things that, especially in horror films, you can check out the way they use a lot of sound effects for, to create tension, to create drama. The door creaking open, for example, would, if it's late at night, and if it's the only sound that comes in, it's going to be really, really scary for anyone. So those are the kind of things that you should think of when you're writing. What is your setting? What are your visuals? What are your sounds? And now we come to some of the tools that I'm going to give to you when you start writing your own story. So I think, the one part of the presentation was that you understand how it's an audiovisual medium and how it's different from the story to the screenplay. If in case you guys have any questions, you can ask, or I can now move on to the next part, which is how to create a structure to your story. So you already.
Sorry, you guys can raise your hands, like the raise hand button at the bottom, or you can post in the group chat. So either of those two things will work. So whatever, if any of you have any questions.
They're all sitting in their classroom. How sweet. Okay. So, all right. So you can ask the questions, like Akansha said, anytime. And now when you are creating your story, you need to basically understand how we write it. So there is, you must have heard the term, this is a formula film, right? So what is the formula? So the formula is basically a structure that has been standardized over the years, which writers have, always used. And it's not just in films. Even if you go back and read literature, even Shakespeare used to use a structure to his plays. And Google that, just read more about it. How structures to story is written. So everything, basically, when you see a formal piece of writing, whether it is even if you're watching, for example, a 10-minute stand-up act by a comedian, you would realize that even they have a structure. They always, even if they are telling you a joke, the joke also will have three parts to it. And that's why, and the people who tell their jokes well, they know this, and that's why the joke lands well, and you find it funny and you laugh. So no matter what it is, if whether it's a podcast, whether it's a play, whether it is an article, an essay, a book, a screenplay, everything follows a structure. That's why a structure is important, because there are some set of rules that if you follow, then it will have the right kind of impact on the person who's experiencing it, who's reading it, listening to it, whatever it is. Now, of course, these are a set of rules. There are many writers and directors who've broken the structure. You can probably check out some of the films which actually don't follow this structure at all. They move forth between what's happening now, what happened many years ago. If you go watch those films, there'll be flashbacks that come in between. Obviously, they don't follow the structure, but you have to know the structure to break it. So unless you know the rules of writing, you cannot improvise, and you cannot, try to do something different with it. So the first way is to first learn what those rules are, try to write a story within those rules, and then try to break it. And then try to see if breaking the structure works better when you're telling the story. So now how to achieve that structure? What you need to do now is to identify your hero. That's the first step, which means that now your story needs to have one hero. Now by hero, I don't mean, hero is not gender specific. Hero could be a woman also. Hero is not singular also. Hero could be a sports team, for example, an expedition team that is, trying to maybe do a mountain trip. So it could be anything, but you have to understand whose story are you telling. That is something that you must know from the beginning of your writing process. You have to identify whose story are we going to follow throughout the film. So I've used an example of, like the most basic example. You can basically pick up any superhero film. I've used the example of Spider-Man here, but you can, whatever tools I give you basically work for every story, for every film, on any genre. So whose story is it? The stories of this guy who is, who's a regular guy, who's doing regular things, and he gets bitten by a spider, and then it just becomes his story. So you never waver from that. Then the second thing you need to do is hero established. Now what is the conflict? Right? Now many a times what we fail, this is a very common mistake that writers make, that the conflict is not, either they forget to, no, this is Madhuri, aage, you have to go back. Yeah. So the second thing is that you have to identify the conflict. And we often make this mistake of either not defining clearly what the conflict is, or not being a conflict at all. So if there is a character, what is the conflict? What is he trying to solve? What is he trying to achieve? So if you are saying that, okay, I want to tell the story of a teenage girl, but what is it that the teenage girl has to do? What is it that she needs to find? Even if it is, like a drama, sometimes, we have very complex stories of relationships between parents and kids. And sometimes the kids are, like have some kind of expectations and then they're not being met. Even in that kind of a situation, you have to understand whose story is it, because it cannot be the story of both the people. It's either the story of the parent or it's the story of the child. So you have to, and then the story has to be written from the point of view of that person. So even in a story like that, you have to understand what is the conflict, and conflict doesn't necessarily have to be somewhere outside, like in case of a Spider-Man kind of a film, the conflict is outside, that there is a bad person out there in the world who wants to attack a city or wants to eliminate all the people or wants to have some kind of a superpower so he can rule on these people. So the conflict is out there. But sometimes that conflict could also be an inner conflict, that there is something that I'm experiencing and I'm not being able to let it go. And because I have some set beliefs, or I have, problem with resolving.
Accept and unmute thing, please. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Continue. Sorry.
no problem. Okay, so once the conflict has been created, then you have to raise the stakes. Now, this again is really, really important. What does it mean to raise the stakes? Now, if I'm a person, if I'm a hero, and there is a problem. Say, for example, I need a certain I need a certain jacket from a certain store. I'm just giving a very basic example. That's the thing I want to achieve. Okay, now even if I'm not able to buy that jacket in the store, it makes no difference, right? So my story is not important, and nobody would be interested if I come around and tell you, okay, you know what, I tried to buy that jacket, but that store was closed and I'm really sad because I really wanted to buy it. You wouldn't care about me, right? So the first rule of storytelling was that you have to root for the protagonist. When will you root for me? Is when I would come and tell you that if I do not get that jacket in time, I would probably, not be able to go and participate in a sporting event. And it becomes so important because I have been training for that event for the past 1 year. And now my chances of participating are being jeopardized because I'm not being able to find that jacket. So now suddenly, that thing just amplifies, right? Now suddenly there's tension because time is running out and I need to, go and find and do something that's, without which I'm going to suffer. So the higher the stakes are, so that's the stake. What's at stake for me? What's at stake for me, that I will lose something for which I have worked very hard. Now that's a story that somebody might be interested in. So if you look at a Spider-Man movie, it's, like the stakes are really high, because if this person wins, the adversary wins, then the stakes are that the whole city would, all the people in the city would die if he gets his hands on this superpower. So the stakes are really high, which is why, when Spider-Man has to decide whether he's going to do this or not going to do this, it becomes a moral question. It becomes a question of his conscience. It's not something that he wants to do, but he's being thrown into the situation because the stakes are that much higher. So that's the thing that you have to come up with, that if you have a hero, if you have a conflict, if there's something that he wants to have, if he doesn't already have it, why is it important for him to have it? So it has to either be like a life and death question, or it has to be a question of his morality, or it has to be something without which, he cannot function. It's something that's for the greater good of the society, but you have to create the stakes for him. Otherwise, there is no motivation for him to, get out of bed and do something about it, right? And also because the audience doesn't care. Otherwise, they don't care whether he ends up fighting the bad guy or not, because the world is at peril. Then he must do it. So those are the things you must remember in the structure. Find your hero, create a conflict, build up the stakes, find your adversary. Who's he fighting? There has to be somebody. Is your protagonist fighting the government, the system, the bad guys? Maybe, like sometimes, for example, you have films where people are, like I said, adventure films where somebody's trying to scale the height of a mountain. So who's your adversary then? Your adversary is bad weather. Your adversary is the challenge that comes with going on top of Mount Everest, for example. When you go up on a mountain, there could be many, many things which might stop you, which might discourage you. You might be low on oxygen. Sometimes your fitness is put on test because it's very, very challenging to go up on the steep mountain. So you have to understand that adversary doesn't always have to be a person. An adversary could also be a situation or a system that you're trying to fight. So those are the clear-cut things. If you can define these 4 things, you got a great story to tell. And I've already told you the structure, how it needs to be written. So take the story, define these 4 things. If you already have something, you can, just start dividing it and then start putting it scene by scene in a screenplay format. Now, extra information is that you have a story. Once you've divided, once you know that this is your story, how do you convert it into a screenplay? So now the screenplay always has 3 acts in it. First, act 1, act 2, act 3. And I'm going to explain this quickly through examples also. First act is basically your setup, where you create a world of the characters. This is the person whose story I'm trying to tell. This is the city they live in. This is the world that we have created. It could be, somebody living in, like a gully in Bombay, or it could be someone living in a high rise in Delhi, or a small little house somewhere in the village of Rajasthan. So what is the world like? And before the story of the protagonist begins, what was the world that he or she was inhabiting? So then who's the hero? Whose story are we following? So get into that straight up. What is their conflict? What is that one thing that they are missing? Or what is that one event that happens because of which they start questioning the world around them? Is it that, maybe they're trying to look for a job and suddenly a job offer comes, but because they, probably have to bribe somebody to get that job, for example. Now that creates a conflict because they want the job, but they don't want to give the bribe. So what are they going to do? So that's how you create the conflict. How are they supposed to solve it? So act 1, basically, the hero realizes this is the path I need to take in order to solve this conflict. Act 2, confrontation. So basically now you start putting the plan into act. So if you see in any film, till one point, the film goes, like in one pace, and suddenly you will see that there'll be some fast music, and, suddenly you'll see action is happening and things are moving quickly, and this happens and that happens. That's basically your second act, where, where the hero puts things into motion. Now, this is also the point where they meet their allies. Now, if you see in any film, you will find that they will make some friends who will help them achieve that goal. They could be, they could be Tuffy and Tuffy the dog also. It could be anyone. So they meet their allies, they create a plan to solve the conflict, but they fail. So the first attempt always has to end up in a failure, because that's how you raise your stakes. That's how the hero also, because the hero also has to go through a personal transformation, because to change something, to bring a change either in your personal life or in the world around you, it's not easy, right? You don't get things like that in your life. So you make an attempt, you fail, and that's when the audience will cheer for you, because when you're watching that story, you're saying, come on, you can do this, right? That's what you're trying to, like I said, the first lesson, remember, you have to make the audience feel something. So unless the hero loses, you will not wish for him to come back up. So create that failure. And in the third act, you finally give out the resolution, where the hero is now, he's crossed that line from where there's no turning back. He's already decided, ab to karna hi hai. So then there has to be an improvisation. And the last battle is fought. This is, like, if you can take any of the sports films, especially these boxing films, if you remember, the first bout that the hero takes, he always loses. But then he comes back with, with increased determination, that I really need to win this medal because my life depends on it. And then when he's down and out, he comes back in his last bout and he defeats that one person who nobody could defeat. So that's the story of an underdog. That's how high the stakes are. That's what he's up against. And then the conflict is resolved, and then the hero returns to a changed world. So when you set up the film, you created one world of the characters, but now when the hero is returned, that world has changed, at least for him, if not for the outside world itself. So then if we could go to the next one, I'll just use an example and show you how this is, this 3-act structure. You can go to any film, go watch any film, and you will find this 3-act structure in it. So Madhuri, if you can just go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of this film, Interstellar. Many of you would have seen it. It's very complex, very, very complex story. But see, if you were to, even a complex film like this, if one were to divide this into acts, I'll show you how it's still possible. So when you open the film, you basically set up the world of the characters, where you see that Cooper and his daughter are living in some village in America, and they realize that, the world is ending because the agrarian sector is in crisis. People are soon going to basically die because there's going to be no food available. That's the setup. Immediately you realize this is Cooper's story. He's the hero. What is the conflict? He gets called by NASA and they tell him that there are 3 different planets which may be habitable. You'll have to go there and get the information whether we can go on that planet or not. So that's your conflict. What are the stakes for him here? I mean, for him as a person, the conflict is that if he leaves, he will never see his daughter again, because she will be really old. She might even be dead when he returns. But what is at stake here? What's at stake is that the world is anyway ending. And if this is not done, then everyone on the planet will die. So this is the most high stake mission that he could ever take. Then you come to the second act. So now our hero knows what needs to be done. So he basically makes a plan. He decides where he needs to go. He leaves behind his kids. He gets his allies. So there are these 2 people on board with him. There's some robots that come with him, and a plan is set into motion. The plan is that we will go to those planets, we'll retrieve the information, we will leave the human embryos or whatever has to be left, and we'll come back. But when they start doing that, the plans fail miserably. One of the guys, killed, one of the person gets left behind, the robots are damaged because they reach one planet, they find one guy who basically faked everything because he wanted them to come and rescue him. And everything goes haywire because it just it didn't work the way they had planned, and they've lost a lot of years in doing this. So that's the second act. Now what happens now? Because now it looks like the plan is failing. But so now what do we have to do? The hero has to improvise. How does he improvise? He basically takes this woman along with him, and he says that we're going to basically slingshot our way through the Madhuri, you can just go to the third act. Yeah. So you'll have to slingshot your way through the black hole. And he says we can reach that planet. We don't even have enough fuel. So see, the stakes are getting higher and higher. So the tension is building up. The people are lost. The machines are damaged. The fuel is less. The mission needs to be completed. How do you do it? So he improvises and he says, let's slingshot through the, through the black hole. The gravitational pull is going to send us right across to we don't need to use our fuel. That's the plan he makes. But what happens is the black hole pulls him in, and he finds himself in this very strange place, which is basically, a replica of the bookshelf that the daughter used to see earlier. And this is when he basically understands what was going on. He tries to send a message to his daughter, and his daughter receives it. So that's the end of the resolution. So he fights that last battle to save humanity by sending the message to his daughter. And the conflict gets resolved when the daughter understands that it was his father trying to tell her, send this message. She decodes it. She comes up with the formula. And many years later, in real time, when the father returns, then the daughter has managed to take all the people and habitate them on a different planet. So when he returns to a different world. So he has managed to do what he came to do. So even though there are many complex scientific, physics related things in this, but even a complex film like this can be broken down into the 3-act structure. You can basically take any film and the 3-act structure remains the same. So that's pretty much it. We have, I think, some time to take some questions if anyone has.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aditi, for this enlightening presentation. I have studied this before, but it was a really helpful sort of recap into getting into like the 3-act structure, getting into the acts and structure of a screenplay. So I hope it was also very helpful for the students who have attended. Now we will be very happy to take some questions. Please use the chat box to write out your questions. We already have 2, so we'll just start with those. So the first one is from a student who's asking, how do we upload a film on Netflix? So Aditi, if you could just run through that.
You can't upload a film on Netflix. Only Netflix can upload a film on Netflix. So either Netflix has to ask you to make a film, or you have to make a film and then go to the agencies that Netflix works with, and you have to pitch it to them. It's called a pitch. So you have to show them. If they like the film, then they will take it and put it on their platform. That's how it works.
Thank you. If you guys have any follow-up questions, please feel free to, again, use the chat box and write out your questions. The second one is from a student called Momita, who wanted to ask about a doubt regarding the second part of the 3-act structure. This structure is used often in most stories, meaning that most will expect the first plan to fail, which results in lack of investment. How should a writer aim to combat this issue effectively?
I didn't understand. Lack of investment.
So she has written it out in the chat box. So if you want, you can just read that. If you can see it at 11:49.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about this structure is used in most stories. Will expect the first plan to fail, which results in lack of investment. How should a writer aim to combat this issue effectively? Lack of investment is not something I'm being able to understand. Momita, do you want to just come and ask that question
Yes. Okay, she was
directly?
referring to the audience.
Acha. Okay. So basically that you're saying that the audience loses interest in it, is it? That I think she meant interest and not investment. Okay. So no, you have to basically see it doesn't actually, you don't lose interest because that's why the structure is made, because if the film, see, a film always, a story, any story follows a graph. So anything follows one tone. Even if you listen to music, a song for example, and if a song always has the same beat, you'll get bored and you'll probably not listen to it for more than 10 seconds, right? You are hooked on to a to a music piece or a song also, because the beat goes up and down and up and down. So that's how the graph of anything works. So that's why the three act structure works, because it starts from a one tone graph, and then it suddenly gives you a high and suddenly makes you fall. So you have to basically take the audience on a ride, on like in a merry-go-round, where they feel the high with the character, but they also feel his lows. So the audience actually doesn't lose interest when the graph drops. It's basically a time, because what you have to do is that you have to give the hero, like this is a larger discussion about how a journey of a hero is mapped out. Sometimes what you need to do is that, what happens is that when even in life, what happens is when you're trying to do something and you're thinking, why am I not being able to do this? And you go to inside your inner this thing, and you start introspecting, did I do something wrong? Is it something that where I'm failing? And then you realize, okay, maybe this is not something that I'm doing right, that I was maybe doing this for the wrong reasons. And you start to work on yourself as a person, and then you come back with a different approach to the same problem, or you come back as a changed person, and that is your graph. So not only the story needs to have a graph, but even the character needs to have a graph, that when you are going through a life changing experience, you don't come out of it unchanged as a person, right? You also change as a person. So it becomes a story of the character also. So when you give the character the story, that he's, when he feels the low, how does he deal with it, and how does it change him as a person? When they have to take, like the moral call, that should I do this or should I not do this? That's something that holds the audience. So they do not lose interest when the story graph is falling. You combat that by creating and resolving inner conflicts of a character. So any other question?
Sorry,
What
yeah, I was
point
on
of,
mute. We
no
have another
worries.
question. Apart from FTII, which other colleges are good for filmmaking?
Um,
Presumably, I think in India maybe would be a
yeah,
good.
yeah. Outside though, I wouldn't know too many. But yeah, you could try for Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, that is SRFTI. That's also a good institute. There is also Prasad Institute. You can check that out.
LB
These,
Prasad, yeah, that's in
yeah,
Chennai
yeah.
and Trivandrum. Hmm.
Other these are the institutes which I would recommend. You can basically check out these three.
Another question is, what point of production should we add the music?
Yeah, it really it depends on you. I mean, sometimes directors create music even before they go in for their shoots, when they're writing it, the first draft stage also of the screenplay also, sometimes, because it helps them get the mood and the feel of the film right. Sometimes you finish shooting the film, and then when you're putting the scenes together, and then you basically see something, see a scene, and then you create it accordingly. So it depends, but ideally it is done when your edit is finished, and then the music composer looks at the finished edit. He can see the film in front of him, and that's according to that he composes. But if you come across a music piece, sometimes, you know, like I listen to songs and I feel this is a great song and this would work really well for my story. So I also sometimes start sourcing for songs and music much before I start the film.
Okay. Our next question is, how do you decide the percentage of dialogues and voiceover with a background music in a film? These are
Background
tough questions,
music,
guys. I have to say these are really, really good questions. You're asking all the right nuanced questions. And so I'm sure all of you are budding and wonderful filmmakers, and we look forward to seeing
yeah,
your work.
I know.
But yeah, Aditi, go ahead.
Percentage of dialogue and voiceover with the background music. See, those are two very different things. They are used for two very different, to solve two different issues. Dialogue or voiceover is basically something that takes your story forward, right? Like I said, that if you don't need dialogues, don't use them. If you don't need a voiceover, don't use them. But background music is something which is used to enhance the story, not to take the story forward in any way. So background music, if I want you to feel sad, for example, about a certain situation, or if I want to increase the tension in a scene, it's a fight scene, and people are fighting, both things are important, and then there is no percentage to it. If I'm writing, for example, if you see David Fincher's latest film that has come released on Netflix, it's his most verbose film yet. It has voiceover in it. It is very dialogue-y. It's called The Killer. So he, you know, like he generally doesn't use this kind of treatment, but if you see, it has a lot of dialogues in it. So it depends on what is the treatment that you're giving to your film. Sometimes there are films which are very minimal dialogues, which just have long takes and long shots and very less dialogues. But music is something which you just use to enhance mood and feel, and to get the point across. That if I want you to feel nervous, I'll use a high-paced music to build up the tension, or I'll use something really sad, or I'll use something comical to get the comic effect out. But that doesn't replace the dialogues. I still need the dialogues to say what I'm trying to say. So you can't do the percentage of this. You can do the percentage of dialogues versus no dialogue, but not dialogue versus music.
Okay. Our next question is from Kamini. Do you always incorporate the suggestions given by the directors and producers? What if the ideas conflict?
Yes, Kamini, you always incorporate the suggestions given by directors and producers, because they are the ones who are, you know, like making the film. So once a screenwriter has basically finished the script, and the script goes to a director or a producer, and they've signed the contract with you saying that we will pay you so much money for your script, it belongs to them. And if they're nice people, then they will ask you before making changes. If they're not nice people, they will not ask you, and you won't be able to do anything. So it just depends on your luck. If you're in luck, then, you know, like for example, I'm a writer director, but when I'm working with other writers, because I'm a nice person, so I will ask them before making changes in it. And if the ideas conflict, then, you know, then it has to be in the favor of the director and not in the favor of the scriptwriter. Because otherwise, if you decided to hand over your script to another director producer, then it belongs to them, and then you in effect have no right to make any changes in it as a writer.
Such is the way life works. Our next one is from Sachin Sharma, who is asking, what movie is a good movie? What message should it convey in order to be a good movie?
Sachin, the good movie is the one that makes you feel something. Period. It just, you know, like irrespective of how much money it makes, how many people like it, who's the star featuring in the film, what is the, you know, like the social issue it talks about. It's not a good movie if it doesn't make you feel anything. So whatever you set out to do as a filmmaker, it should hit the right chords. It should make people feel what you are intending them to feel. It's that's the most important thing. What message should it convey? It depends on what the theme of the film is. Sometimes films don't have a message also. They're just like comedies don't really have any message. They're just there to provide a few laughs to the audience, and that's that. Sometimes you may end up making films where you want people to empathize with a certain community, and you say, look here, look what's happening with these people. And then you want the audience to, either empathize or educate the audience about it. So those are different kind of films. So it depends on what is the film that you're trying to make.
Great. So guys, we just have time for 2 last questions, which is great because I think those are the amount in the chat box. From Seema Patel, we have technically, how can a film be made? I think it's her question. So if you could just sum that up maybe a little bit.
Technically, how can a film be made is that there are many aspects of making the film, Seema. You have to get a whole team together who can, there's a producer who basically does all the execution work. That person brings the whole team together, mounts the film, raises the money to make the film, understands and makes a strategy or what will happen to the film once it's made, how will it be shown, who will it be shown to. You have to get a technical team together, you have to get somebody to direct the film, you have to get someone to shoot it, who's the director of photography, you need to get an editor, you need to get a sound recordist, you need to get a makeup person, actors, production designers who basically do your sets and propping. You need to do somebody to do costumes for you. So all these people, an editor comes after the shoot is finished. There's a sound designer who works on it, a music director who works on it. They all come with big teams. There are many smaller parts of these processes which are done by different people. So that's how it is put together. So many different people come in and they read the script, and then they tell you, I think this is how we can do this. And then you collaborate with them, you brainstorm with them, and that's how the film is made.
Our last question is from a student at Primbad's Garden. I think she's here. You can see her. Hi. Her question is, how do you add dialogue which makes people feel something?
The dialogues basically need to be authentic. See, that is the only way it will make you feel something. When they sound authentic, when they sound like the real person is saying them. Or if it is something which is poetic on the other specter, like sometimes you're making realistic films and their authenticity really works for you. But sometimes, you're making like this grand cinema, like Bhansali type of films, and there, if you see, of course, they're not realistic dialogues. But why they work is because they're very poetic, because the characters have been written in a certain way, and they are the kind of dialogues which are very impactful in a different way, but impactful nonetheless. So sometimes, I'm not a dialogue writer as such, so I can't tell you where the dialogue writers get their inspirations from. But I'm guessing that, they read a lot of literature, they read a lot of poetry, and then they basically extract, those tones, and I don't know what's the technical way. And like I told you in the beginning also, that everything, even a stand-up act, has a structure to it. So when you're writing dialogues, maybe you can actually have a session with a dialogue writer who can take you through their process of how they actually write it, because even dialogues have their own graph, that they'll start at some point, then they'll take you to a high, and then and Bhansali's film is actually a great way to learn effective dialogue writing, because the dialogues all have a certain graph to it. So they kind of are written in the same way in which he intends to make the film, like the grandeur, and how the characters are larger than life in his films. And the dialogues are also like that, like in action films, everybody will be like a smart aleck, and they'll deliver these punchlines which people will always remember. So that's basically, you know, you have to understand what is a genre, who are these characters, and what are they trying to say. So it depends on that. But if in general you're just trying to write, like I make realistic kind of films, so I try to go for authenticity. And I think if you try to find authenticity in, you know, in this, I think in reality, like for example, comedy films is something I like, and I think people in the world are very funny. So if you just observe how people talk, and if you just are able to get that on the paper, you will get a lot of laughs, because people are really really funny in real life if you really talk to them.
That's a good, that's a piece of advice that any actually writer will give you, is just speak to people and observe people. I think you'll get a lot of your characters and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
great learning,
actually.
life learning through that,
And a lot
right?
of actually filmmakers, you can actually go back and listen to their interviews. They'll tell you that most of the iconic characters that they wrote was picked up from somebody they knew, somebody in, you know, their mohalla, somebody they knew as a child. So a lot of our inspiration comes from the real world.
That's a wonderful note on which we can end this session. So thank you all so much for being here. Please give it up for Aditi. I know,
I
or you're
hope
all on mute,
I
but
hope you
just
learned something from
clap.
me.
Yeah, we hope that you learned something, and you know that this was a fruitful session for you guys. We have another one scheduled for the 25th, and that's going to be about learning how to shoot on a mobile phone. So that's a very different skill set, but important nonetheless. So we hope to see you there at 11 a.m. on the 25th. And thank you so much for being here.